options. Well, like if the challenge is making sure the logistics chain and everything, the whole value chain is there and working, and that has been some of the challenges we've had within the sort of fibre sector and wool specifically, of a kind of a broken chain that hasn't led to great returns for the farmers. So I think that's the key thing. Get that chain working well. Yeah.
New Zealand Cashmere, New York Fashion Week. Let's do it.
Can I answer that? Wool Yarns has invested in the Scarron and Deheron here on site, $2 million. So we're ready.
Good on you.
We're ready for the fibre.
Good on you, Andrew. We're ready, and I'm ready for my cashmere turtleneck made in New Zealand. Boosie Moran and Andrew Hargard, you've been wonderful. Thank you for being with me. I'm Wallace Chapman. I'll see you tomorrow, 3:45. Checkpoint with Lisa Owen is next.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei, when is a minister not a minister? Kiri Allan apologises for criticising RNZ's treatment of Māori staff at her fiance's farewell. A third baby dies of whooping cough, raising concerns the brutal disease is spreading undetected. Te Whatu Ora's Dr William Ranger is live. The gory details of a council going south. The mayor's gone to ground, the council has gone all together, and top brass aren't talking. The long weekend looms, so has cyclone-battered Coromandel got the welcome mat out. Len Salter's live. Calls to bin junk food advertising in kids' sport. And if only the walls could talk, but they don't. So we're going to need your help identifying a photo hidden in them. Watch us live on the RNZ website.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. Cabinet Minister Kiri Allan has apologised after criticising RNZ's treatment of Māori staff during a farewell for her fiancé, Mani Dunlop. Ms Dunlop, who presented RNZ's midday report, left last week. Ms Allan took aim at RNZ's culture during Ms Dunlop's work farewell on Friday, addressing gathered staff, including CEO Paul Thompson and board member Jane Wrightson. In her speech, Ms Allan said the organisation's board and leadership team needed to reflect on why RNZ was failing to retain Māori talent. Ms Allan prefaced her comments by saying they were off the record and made in her personal capacity rather than as a minister. In a statement to RNZ today, Ms Allan admits her comments could have been interpreted as her telling RNZ how to manage its staff or company. She says that was not her intent, but she is sincerely sorry if her comments made people feel uncomfortable. A third baby has died from whooping cough this year, and there are fears the disease may be spreading undetected in the community. The announcement from Te Whatu Ora today comes after 2 deaths were made public last month. Health correspondent Rowan Quinn reports.
RNZ understands the baby died last week and was from a different part of the country to the other 2 babies. Te Whatu Ora is worried the disease is much more widespread than the 11 cases officially reported. That's because of the high ratio of fatalities. It's urging people to make sure their babies get their vaccinations on time. And it wants pregnant women and people who will spend a lot of time around unimmunised newborns to be vaccinated too, so they don't spread the disease.
Gore's residents are divided over who's to blame for the current impasse at Gore District Council. Last week it was revealed first-term Gore Mayor Ben Bell and the council's chief executive Stephen Parry are no longer speaking. Another councillor has been appointed as a go-between for the two men, and yesterday Councillor Brett Highstead resigned after 5 terms in the role. Gore residents are divided equally among those who blame Mr Bell and those who blame his colleagues and council staff. One resident says Mr Bell is in over his head.
I'm worried that a young mayor doesn't have the maturity to navigate his way through issues. Me at 23, I could never navigate my way through that, or at 33 for that matter. So the inability to find common ground is really concerning. It really is.
State Highway 1 at Transmission Gully is now fully open after a crash between Paikakariki and Paua Tahanui early this morning. Lanes in both directions were shut after a collision between a fuel tanker and another truck saw nearly 1,000 litres of fuel spill onto the motorway. Waka Kotahi says delays are expected given the late reopening of the route and advised motorists to take care during peak traffic. Sports clubs will have to rethink their sponsorship if new advertising rules go through. A new proposed code from the Advertising Standards Authority will ban junk food logos on kids' sports uniforms, vouchers and prizes. That includes fast food chains serving products high in fat, salt or sugar that don't meet the Australasian nutrient food standards, like some McDonald's meals. But sports clubs such as Auckland's Cornwall Cricket rely on the burger chain for funding, equipment and coaching. General Manager Matt Herring says McDonald's is the club's second largest sponsor.
Spend a lot of money on cricket balls, whether soft or hard balls, helps us train parent coaches. If it wasn't for them, our registrations probably wouldn't cover it, so it's a huge help and it's a huge boost.
The Children's Advertising Code is voluntary and self-regulated by the advertising industry. In other sports news, Black Caps coach Gary Stead says it's too early to rule New Zealand's most prolific run scorer, Kane Williamson, out of October's Cricket World Cup in India. Williamson arrived back home this morning after suffering a serious knee injury while fielding for Gujarat Titans in their season-opening IPL match in India. Williamson's thought to have torn ligaments in his right knee, but Stead says he's having more scans.
Look, it's too early to know about Kane and where he's at the moment. I think the World Cup's obviously 6 or 7 months away, and until we get that update, I mean, we won't consider any of the options until we know for sure.
Meanwhile, Central Districts have won the Plunket Shield with a 188-run win over Auckland to pip Canterbury for the trophy. Australian Cam Smith says it's important live golfers challenge for the Masters title this week to stamp out the belief they don't play real golf. Smith joined the Saudi Arabia-funded tour after winning the British Open last year and is one of 18 players from the circuit at Augusta National. He accepts the live fields aren't as strong as the PGA Tour but says they still play serious golf. All Blacks prop Ethan de Groot has re-signed with New Zealand Rugby until the end of 2026. The 13-test prop will remain with the Highlanders and Southland. And Everton's earned a much-needed 1-1 draw with Tottenham Hotspur to give them a major boost in their battle to avoid relegation from the English Premier League. That's the news.
A president about to be arraigned.
Every moment that he's not in that courtroom, he's going to try to control the narrative, try to frame this entire case.
A crackdown underway on lobbyists.
If one side of the debate can employ lobbyists, it's then able to sway things in a way that the other side isn't able to.
But it's no big deal to have a swipe card, says one of them.
It lets you go into Parliament without putting your cell phone and stuff through the X-ray machine. You can go to the cafe, which is cool. That's about it.
Swipe right for Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
We're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Te Ika Maui, the North Island, mainly fine, but isolated showers about Northland until tonight. Tomorrow, cloudy periods and isolated showers developing in western areas south of Waitomo. Looking at Te Waiponamu, the South Island, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine apart from areas of morning low cloud or fog. Bulla and Westland, fine at first, cloudy periods developing this afternoon or evening with isolated showers. Rain spreading north through Westland tomorrow with heavy falls and thunderstorms possible. Otago and Southland, fine inland but cloudy periods and a shower or two about coastal areas today. Cloud increasing tomorrow with a few spots of morning rain, then showers spreading north in the evening. Fiordland, a few showers turning to rain for a time tonight and tomorrow morning with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms. And Re Kohu, Chatham Islands, often cloudy with showers, clearing tomorrow afternoon. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines at about 20 past 5.
Kia ora rā eho. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Cabinet Minister Kiri Allan has apologised after criticising RNZ's treatment of Māori staff during a farewell for her fiancé, Mani Dunlop. Ms Dunlop, who presented Midday Report, left the organisation last week. At her work farewell in RNZ's boardroom on Friday, Kiri Allan took the mic and addressed gathered staff, including the Chief Executive, Paul Thompson, and board member Jane Wrightson. We're joined now by our political editor, Jane Patterson. Kia ora, Jane. Can you give us an idea of the comments that Kiri Allan made?
Kia ora, Lisa. Yes, well, as you said, this happened at Mani Dunlop's farewell at RNZ in Wellington on Friday. Now, Kiri Allan was there as Mani Dunlop's partner and fiancé, but of course she's also a cabinet minister. She got up and addressed the farewell and recounted Mani's time as a journalist and the contribution that she had brought to RNZ, but she also took aim at the public broadcaster's culture when she addressed the gathered staff who were both in the room and online. She said that the organisation's board and leadership team needed to reflect on why RNZ was failing to retain Māori talent. It was very critical about, I suppose, the prospects and the treatment of Māori staff at the organisation. Now, she did preface her comments saying they were off the record and made in her personal capacity rather than as a minister.
So what is the problem with that? Is a minister sometimes a minister and not a minister?
Well, the Cabinet Manual makes it clear that ministers must conduct themselves at all times in the knowledge that their role is a public one and the expectation that they exercise a professional approach and also that they exercise good judgment. Now, the other element to this is that as a public broadcaster, it is critical for RNZ and the wider media to be seen to be completely independent, editorially independent from the government, the separation from the government and the Fourth Estate. And under the Radio New Zealand Act, the law that governs Radio New Zealand, it is very specific and it says no responsible minister or any other minister may give direction to the public radio company, effectively for any aspect of their coverage or their operation. Now note that Kiri Allan does not have media or broadcasting responsibilities in her portfolios, but this law doesn't make that distinction. It is any minister.
And so has Kiri Allan had anything to say?
She issued RNZ a statement a short time ago. She has apologised, but she said that she was invited as Mani's fiancé to speak on her behalf and her family's behalf and to her employer, RNZ, of course, of 11 years. She said she did so in her personal capacity, but she absolutely acknowledges and accepts that she is a senior government minister, and as such, there is no delineation in terms of public perception. She makes the point herself that she doesn't have those specific portfolio responsibilities, but says, I sincerely apologise if any of my comments or reflections said at Mani's farewell made any person feel uncomfortable. And then she also addressed that point of independence. On reflection, I also accept it could have been interpreted as me telling RNZ how to manage their staff or company. That was not my intent and is certainly not my job. My sole intention was to speak on behalf of Mani's family.
Okay, what about the Prime Minister? Because obviously this is the second minister with questions around judgment.
That's right. So we approached PMO and said, is this conduct that you would expect of a minister given the rules and conventions that I've just talked about? Prime Minister Chris Hipkins' office issued this statement. He said that he has accepted the minister's apology. She was invited to the event in a personal capacity and was there as a family member. Now, Chris Hipkins in the statement does acknowledge that it can be really tricky managing family conflicts of interest, and he said the management of issues involving families of MPs is tricky. It is natural and understandable for people to support their families, but he did say in this instance it would have been better if Kiri, given her ministerial position, had chosen not to take the opportunity to speak.
Okay, that leaves Radio New Zealand. What comment from them, in the sense also that obviously the minister may have apologised for the context of her comments, but does Radio New Zealand have a problem with the way it treats Māori staff?
That's right. When we went to CEO Paul Thompson and put those questions to him about the criticism that Kiri Allan had levelled at RNZ and directly to him at that farewell. Now, again, another statement. He says RNZ welcomes kaimahi or staff into the organisation with either a mihi whakaatu or pōwhiri. As is customary, we also farewell kaimahi in the appropriate manner. He says they're private functions and provide an opportunity for whānau and kaimahi to gather to acknowledge, celebrate and support departing colleagues. Farewells also include an open invitation for anyone present to whai kōrero, and the free expression of views is encouraged. More than a dozen people took this opportunity, but the statement did not address those criticisms about RNZ's culture or its treatment of Māori staff.
Thank you, Jane. That's RNZ's political editor, Jane Patterson there. And just a note, we have requested an interview with the CEO, Paul Thompson, and of course we're on air until 6:30. It is 13 minutes after 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. A Gore councillor has quit, saying there's unsustainable anxiety at the council. The resignation of Brett Heisted has triggered a costly by-election. The Mayor and Chief Executive aren't talking to each other, and another councillor is acting as a go-between. However, locals seem to be just as divided as their elected representatives and just as confused as the rest of the country as to what's going on behind closed doors. Timothy Brown is in Gore.
When he started work as the youngest mayor in the country, Ben Bell had lofty aims.
I think I want to be a mayor that engages with the councillors and engages with the community, and so we have a united front as a community and as a council that we're all heading in the same direction.
But whatever direction the Gore District Council is heading, it's anything but united. Since RNZ revealed last Thursday that Mayor Ben Bell and the Gore District Council's Chief Executive Stephen Parry are no longer on speaking terms, we've only heard one thing from the young mayor, and that didn't change today.
You've reached Benjamin Bell. Please leave a message.
The 23-year-old has gone to ground, and even the shock resignation of long-standing councillor Brett Heisted, who shared a tense relationship with the district's new mayor, hasn't prompted him to speak to his ratepayers. But most deafening of all is the total silence coming from the currently fractured and dysfunctional council. Mr Heisted sent a pair of resignation letters to Mr Parry and Deputy Mayor Keith Hovell. He didn't alert Ben Bell. The letter itself was brief.
Dear Keith, I did make comment to an individual outside of council prior to the meeting held on the 28th of March. However, to be clear, I did not and have not disclosed any information following the meeting held on the 28th of March. Since the election, I found the environment highly stressful, the levels of anxiety unsustainable, and I am not prepared to put my family through this anymore. I did get it wrong in this instance. I apologise and will tender my resignation.
The meeting referenced in the letter is the behind closed doors extraordinary council meeting last Tuesday. Councillors discussed the broken relationship between their highest elected and unelected officials and charted a path forward. Council has adopted the extraordinary position of appointing a go-between, Councillor Richard McPhail, to liaise between the CEO and Mayor Bell. The Mayor has been axed from the committee which oversees the performance of the Chief Executive, and mediation between the two, which started in December, will continue, though how effective it will prove to be remains questionable. Mr Heisted was in his sixth term as a councillor. He'd been there almost as long as the former Mayor Tracy Hicks, who himself was elected to the role just a few years after Mr Parry started as Chief Executive in 2001. Also in the background is an employment dispute between Mr Bell's mother and the council. She worked there for about 18 months from 2020 to 2022, but no councillor, nor the Mayor, nor senior staff are willing to discuss what's going on at the Gore District Council. However, locals were keen to share their view, if not their identities.
I'm worried that a young mayor doesn't have the maturity to navigate his way through issues, and whether that be personal or whatever, because me at 23, I could never navigate my way through that, or at 33 for that matter. So the inability to find common ground is really concerning. It really is.
My opinion is he's a bit young for the job.
So you think the mayor should go?
Yep.
Others felt the blame lay with those refusing to work with the newly elected mayor.
He's just been knocked back all the time from what I can see of it.
Oh, it's just a bit of petty squabbling. Like children throwing their toys out of the cot. And they should be supporting the mayor.
Checkpoint has sought comment from a number of business and community leaders, as well as several councillors and council figures. They either didn't respond or refused. All queries were referred to Deputy Mayor Keith Hovell, with one councillor telling RNZ, quote, "Until we know who's leaking, it's no comment." But Mr Hovell has also refused our interview requests, saying he's still trying to figure out the implications of the current impasse. Maybe the Mayor himself summed it up best when he took over the role.
I guess I've got an element of got to prove that young people can be in leadership roles like this.
And that was Timothy Brown there reporting on the gory entrails of council down south. If you live in Gore, let us know your thoughts. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Junk food logos on team tops and burgers and chips for Player of the Day. These norms of kids' sport may soon be over under drafted new rules from the Advertising Standards Authority. Sam Ollie reports.
Junk food and kids' sport, they go hand in hand, but the Advertising Standards Authority might be about to change that.
I think it would definitely be better if they promoted healthier options.
To be healthy foods and not junk food that's not available in every home either. It also makes a big push on parents that can't even provide that stuff or don't want their kids even having it. And we end up with all our big, huge McDonald's and Burger King and KFC, I'm going to say blubber babies.
Because, you want them to have a good life and a long one, actually, not a obese life.
They just see it and they think it's normal and it's there at sports, then it's an everyday thing.
The draft rules say no more junk food labels on kids' uniforms and no more vouchers and prizes sponsored by junk food brands. That includes chains serving products high in fat, salt or sugar that don't meet the Australasian Nutrient Food Standards, like some McDonald's meals. But sports clubs like Auckland's Cornwall Cricket rely on that restaurant chain for funding equipment, a club with 760 juniors this season.
Spend a lot of money on cricket balls, whether soft or hard balls, helps us train parent coaches. If it wasn't for them, our registrations probably wouldn't cover it. So it's a huge help and it's a huge boost.
General Manager Matt Herring says McDonald's, the club's second largest sponsor, has logos on shirts and training gear and Player of the Day awards.
If it wasn't for McDonald's, I think we would struggle.
Advertising Standards Authority Chief Executive Hilary Suter says advertisers are normally very receptive to changing rules.
We have a 96% compliance rate with our ruling, so there's a pretty high level of engagement.
But the code is voluntary and industry-run, and that's inappropriate, according to Health Coalition Aotearoa co-chair Lisa Te Morenga. Instead, she says central government should set the standards.
They just don't have the teeth that we would like them to have. And often the codes are watered down in a way that still benefits or enables the organisation members to continue selling their products.
She also says the proposed new rules are well overdue.
So there have been quite a lot of studies undertaken in children that show that acute exposure to food advertising, particularly unhealthy food advertising, does increase intake of unhealthy foods.
Consultation on the new advertising code ends next month.
Sam Ollie reporting there. It is 5:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm really keen for your feedback on that one. 2101 on text. Do we need to ditch junk food logos on team tops and sponsorship? And if your Player of the Day is a burger and chips the thing to do? If not, why not? Let us know your thoughts. The email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Of course, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program. Homai o whakaaro. What do you think of Kiri Allan's comments as a minister ever off duty? Let us know your thoughts on that one too. 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. And the email address checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. It's time for us to go to the headlines. Anaya Evi, mena pita pita kōrero.
Cabinet Minister Kiri Allan says she's sincerely sorry if her criticisms of RNZ's treatment of Māori staff made people feel uncomfortable. She spoke out last Friday during a work farewell for her fiancé, Mani Dunlop, who presented Midday Report, saying RNZ's leadership needed to reflect on why they were failing to retain Māori talent. She said her comments were off the record and she wasn't speaking as a minister. Health body Te Whatu Order warns whooping cough may be spreading undetected in the community after the deaths of 3 babies this year, the most recent last week. It's urging parents to get their babies vaccinated, as well as pregnant women and close family members. Latest figures show the economy was $3.2 billion in the red for the 8 months ended February. The figure is about $600 million higher than forecast and comes on the back of a lower tax take. Finance Minister Grant Robertson says the government's books are still in good shape. Burgers could be off the menu for sports clubs if new sponsorship advertising rules get the go-ahead. The Advertising Standards Authority is proposing to ban junk food logos on kids' sports uniforms, vouchers and prizes. That could include some McDonald's meals, but clubs such as Auckland's Cornwall Cricket say they rely on the burger chain's support. And State Highway 1 Transmission Gully has fully reopened after a fuel tanker and another truck crashed between Paikakariki and Pawa Tahanui early this morning, but delays are expected. Looking at other traffic news in Auckland, a breakdown has just been cleared from the 3rd northbound lane on State Highway 1's Harbour Bridge, just before Stafford Road off-ramp. There may be residual delays there. And still in Auckland on State Highway 1's southbound link, where it merges with State Highway 16 eastbound at the city, a crash is blocking that lane. Our next traffic news and headlines are at 5:40.
Ngā mihi, Evie. An invitation to the Masters is perhaps the most coveted in men's professional golf, and New Zealand's Ryan Fox got one. The 36-year-old will make his debut at Augusta National this week, 7 years after the last Kiwi to play there. Danny Lee, who recently joined the controversial Live Golf Tour, was the last New Zealander to tee off at Augusta, and although Lee isn't in the field, 18 other Live golfers are, and we're joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. Live golfers have been shunned from some PGA Tour events, so how did so many of them make it into the Masters field?
Yes, so Live golfers have been banned from all PGA Tour events except for at the majors. So like the Masters, this is open to anybody who has qualified. So there are actually 19 ways to qualify for the Masters. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through all of them. So all former winners of the Masters get automatic qualification for life. So this involves Live golfers Phil Mickelson, Patrick Reed, Sergio Garcia, Dustin Johnson and Bubba Watson. Also being ranked in the top 50 golfers in the world last year also gets you a qualification. So that's how Ryan Fox got qualified for the Masters. And that was quite a good achievement for him because he was actually outside the top 200 at one point last year. So to have got into the top 50, that's a good achievement, and that's got him into this field. Also, winning the US Open gives access to the Masters for 5 years. So that's Bryson DeChambeau. Australian Cameron Smith, he won the Open, so that's the British Open last year. He's also got 5 years of entry into the Masters, even though he's doing quite well in Live Golf. Winning the 2019 PGA Championship got Brooks Koepka, so he's qualified for this year, and then next year will be his last time that he gets that automatic qualification. And also another interesting one I thought was the current Olympic gold medalist gets entry into the Masters as well.
Well, that's interesting. So how much would it mean to a Live golfer to get the green jacket this year in particular?
Well, so this is the first time this season that the PGA players and the Live golfers are actually teeing off together in a tournament. And there has been some tension between these two tours, as we've probably discussed.
Yeah, it could get interesting.
Exactly. So some of that frostiness is dissipating between the players. And so Live golfer and 2018 Masters winner Patrick Reed, this is his take on the rivalry.
It doesn't matter what tour they're on or anything. It's the top guys going and trying to play for one of the most coveted events in the world. So for myself, it's just going to be business as usual, going out and playing. And of course, what I'd like to have Live, be up at top of course. But really, at the end of the day, it's all of us going in there and just trying to play the best golf we can.
So that's also echoed by Cameron Smith, who said it's quite important for these Live golfers to actually do well at this tournament, because there has been some criticism floating around that Live golf isn't real golf, not played on real golf courses. So to get something like the green jacket, that sort of is a great marketing coup for this rebel league to show that they can go against these more traditional players of golf as well.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you, Felicity. That is our sports reporter, Felicity Reid. Easter would normally be boom times on the Coromandel Peninsula, a playground for Auckland escapees. But the indefinite closure of State Highway 25A, a main route to a number of holiday hotspots, and widespread cyclone damage means the trip there is likely to be a little longer and potentially rougher than normal. So do they still want visitors? Well, joining us now is the Thames Coromandel District Mayor, Len Salt. Kia ora, Len. What are you expecting this Easter?
Oh, look, can I just say I'm really, really looking forward to this Easter. We've had a rough time, as you know, you and I have talked, and it's been a rough ride with weather, rain, slips. The sun is out, the weather is the blue skies, and we're really looking forward to welcoming visitors this Easter. We're just asking people to take the time, enjoy the journey, take it easy on the roads, but come and have a great time.
So you've absolutely got the welcome mat out. You want them to come.
We do. Our businesses really need the visitors, and it breathes life into our district. The people that live here love it, but when we get visitors, the cafes and the restaurants and the beaches are humming, and it just gives it that vibrancy that and we've had a good run. We had Beach Hop recently, which went off really well. We've had Taste of Matarangi last weekend, which had record numbers. So people are out there and enjoying it again.
So you've had a couple of events to boost business, but generally, how has it been going for business? Because it was a bit of a stink summer.
It has been. There's no sugarcoating that. Look. The businesses that are out there have had a couple of years of COVID. They've had a stink summer, as you say. They still need support, and we've had a lot of good support from the government, who have enabled us to put in place a business support fund. And so we're out there helping people and the businesses to get through this rough period. But the thing that really gets them going is visitors and, bums on seats when it comes to the cafes and restaurants. We got some good events coming up this weekend as well. We've got a kite day in Whangamata on Monday. Kauranga Valley Visitor Centre, they've got a really neat Visitors Day planned for the kids. We've got a concert at Coro Glen Tavern on Saturday, 5:30, which is a fundraiser for the flood events. Funds going to the Red Cross. There's lots of things happening across the district this weekend.
Are you working hard to push the message out, Len? Are you doing anything in particular to make sure that visitors know they are welcome?
Working overtime. Destination Hauraki Coromandel have just launched a new initiative, which is basically letting people know the loop road is open. State Highway 25, as you know, that's going to be down for a while. We're not raising any expectations on that. That's likely to be after Christmas. But we'll know in about 3 to 4 weeks what the options are for that. The brakes are not on there, and we've had the Minister here last week who assured us nobody's leaning on a shovel here, but we certainly have the welcome mat out, letting people know that, we're here, we're ready for visitors.
Len, you touched on support for businesses, but the government's business relief fund, if we can call it that, how much did you guys get out of that, and is it enough? Is it gone already?
It's certainly been fully subscribed. It was around $3.8 million, and we've had little over 500 applications for that. We've had also good support for our Merrill Relief Fund, and we've had about just over 200 applications for that. Most of that money now has been distributed, and I'm pleased to say we had fantastic support from our local communities to top up the government contribution. So we have been able to help people. We still need support to get through the winter period, but it's certainly looking a bit more promising than it was at the moment.
Thanks for your time, Len. All the best for the long weekend. That's the Thames Coromandel Mayor there, Len Salt. Time for some of your feedback. A lot of you getting in touch about marketing to kids, junk food. Liz says, let them eat burgers. Only time my kids get to is when they win a voucher. But this one says, I'd like to see an end to junk food advertising to kids. They know they can establish buying habits at a young age and wouldn't be doing it if that wasn't the case. And this one, the Ronald McDonald House also troubles me as well, this person says, getting people when they're vulnerable. Do keep your feedback coming on anything you've heard on the program, 2101 on text. It is 29 minutes to 6, Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is time for the business news. ko taku hoa I nai called Giles Beckford, joining us live from the Wellington studio. Another business survey, Giles, but this one has a bit of influence about it. Tell us more.
Kia ora to you, Lisa. This is the Institute of Economic Research, otherwise known as the NZIER. In the trade, the survey is known as the QSBO, the Quarterly Survey of Business Opinion. It's got a track record of about 40-odd years, and it's one of the few surveys that the Reserve Bank really looks at quite closely. It gives a really good snapshot and drill down into how businesses are faring, what they think about how their own businesses are doing, not just the broader economy, and it splits it up into particular sectors. So from that point of view, it gives a reasonable, real-time economic insight. The latest survey out this morning showed a decrease in the pessimism, if we want to call it a plus. There was an improvement in sentiment generally. Signs there, we won't go into all the numbers, but signs there that some of the inflation pressures are perhaps easing. The interesting one was that for the past 2.5, 3 years, the big worry for businesses, and they keep asking them, is what's the big thing that's confronting you? What's your biggest worry? And they've been saying trying to find workers, trying to find skilled staff, trying to be able to fill those jobs that we've got. That's changed in this survey. People are now saying it's not the workers, although it's still a bit of a nagging concern. We're actually worried about finding customers now. So it's the slowdown in the economy, the slowdown in demand, which of course is what the Reserve Bank's rate hikes have all been about, which is starting to nag away at businesses, making them feel a little bit more cautious. But that being said, this probably gives the Reserve Bank some comfort that it's really starting to get the bite and the traction of those interest rate rises that it's been seeking for the past couple of years. Of course, we've got a rate review out tomorrow. This might be another factor in it thinking that there'll be a rate rise tomorrow, but the next one in May, they might have second thoughts as to whether they need to go ahead with it or not. We'll wait and see. And we should just note on that front that the Reserve Bank of Australia came out about an hour ago. It's held its cash rate at 3.6%, saying we may have to raise some more, but for the time being, we want to see the impact of what we've done so far. Expect to hear that sort of tone in the future from the RNZ.
And Giles, Cyclone Gabrielle, a double-edged sword for one firm. I can't pick it. Which is it?
It's Bremworth, the carpet makers. They have a wool spinning, a yarn spinning mill there, which got completely munted by the cyclone. And one of the problems, of course, is that the product that it was processing then went on to other Bremworth mills in Whanganui and in Auckland. And from that point of view, one goes out and it makes it difficult. So it's decided, well, we'll outsource it, and they're going to go overseas. They're going to send raw wool from New Zealand up to places such as India and Thailand, where there are processing facilities. They'll do the business up there. They'll send the processed wool back to New Zealand to be made into carpets here. Now you say, well, that looks a bit of a pretty far-fetched and roundabout way of doing it, and it must be costly. But they're saying, well, actually, it might just work to our advantage, because when we're sending it up there, overseas buyers will actually see the quality of our raw material. They'll see how good we are. They might actually start knocking on our door and saying, we want to buy your carpets. So they're seeing that there's a possible, as you say, silver lining to this.
And Giles, numbers for us today, please. Market and dollar.
The local share market, look, it was lacklustre until the Reserve Bank decision came out, and then they put on the sprinting shoes. They had a belt to the line, and it closed up 60 points. That's about 0.5%, just a smidgen under 11,900. New Zealand dollar 63 US cents, and a bit stronger 93.1 Australian.
Thank you, Giles. Giles Beckford live from our Wellington studio. If you're vision or mobility impaired, just getting out and about on our crowded streets can be daunting, but lately it's become downright dangerous. Disabled Kiwi are calling for urgent action to improve accessibility on our streets, as speeding riders and discarded e-scooters make our footpaths unsafe. Parisians have just voted to ban e-scooters. Should New Zealand consider the same? Louise Tanuth reports.
70-year-old Laurie Magnus faces many obstacles while navigating Auckland CBD in an electric wheelchair. Often the footpath is so narrow with illegally parked cars or discarded e-scooters blocking her access, she needs to use the road to get past. But she says e-scooters are her biggest issue. Just recently she was hit by one in Aotea Square, which ended in a trip to hospital.
And I was coming down here, and I wasn't going fast because it's a corner, and I turned around and bang. But they were going really fast, and they came right bang, and they got tangled up in the middle of my chair and with this foot plate, and just damaged all of that side of the chair. I remember the person going, sorry, 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 as they disentangled their scooter, jumped on and sped off.
Now she wants to see scooters on the road. Thomas Bryan lives in Wellington. He's vision impaired and uses a cane to get around the city. But it's no defence against poorly parked e-scooters.
They leave them lying on the middle of the footpath. They leave them just standing upright on the footpath. And I've quite often, you get off a bus, you're walking along, and all of a sudden McCain's missed it, and I get a handlebar in my chest.
He says because they're so quiet, there's not enough warning they're coming. With scooters riding on the footpath and alfresco dining in Wellington CBD, Thomas says it's a squeeze.
And there's very little space for someone to come through, say if they're in a wheelchair or they've got a guide dog, or like myself with a cane. You end up whacking people who are sitting at a table, and it's not great for them. And I get quite embarrassed if you hit somebody, or you hit, it's not a great feeling.
In Auckland, Beam and Lime have a licence to operate 2,400 e-bikes and scooters, all up paying the council over $170,000 a year. Operators must follow council rules and bylaws, which includes parking the devices correctly. Riders need to submit a photo once they've parked, and 20% of photos must be checked weekly. They must not be parked in the centre of a footpath and need to leave a clearway of at least 1.8 metres. Veronica Lee Thompson from Auckland Council says 3 council officers monitor scooter parking across the city.
We expect a really high level of compliance. Every time an inspector monitors a device, a notification is automatically sent to the operator, and if it's non-compliant, they've got an hour to fix it.
In the biggest city in the country, there are just 15 designated e-scooter parking spaces in Britomart. However, despite having access to over 3 years of data, the council was unable to provide any information on how many e-scooter reports or infringements have been recorded. Council says more designated parking for scooters is on the way for Queen Street. Veronica Lee Thompson says complaints have dropped since e-scooters arrived 5 years ago.
We used to see a very high number of complaints, and that's definitely settled down. We really don't receive very many complaints now.
At the moment, e-scooters can either ride on the footpath or the road, but there's no separate speed limit for the footpath. 3 years ago, the Ministry of Transport proposed rule changes to make our streets more accessible. One of the changes includes limiting the speed limit to 15 kilometres per hour on footpaths to encourage e-scooters onto the road. Finalised rules were due last year after Cabinet consideration, but nothing has happened, and the Ministry of Transport is unable to confirm when a decision would be made. Thomas and Laurie say they are relying on the decision, and it can't come soon enough.
And that was Louise Tanuth reporting. If you are listening on radio, we'll put the video version on our website. It is 20 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai or whakaaro, we would love your feedback. Let us know your thoughts on e-scooters, whether they can be a bit of a hazard for people. What's the answer? Are they parking properly? Yes or no? Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie is standing by. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
Cabinet Minister Kiri Allan says she wasn't telling RNZ how to manage its employees when she criticised the broadcaster's treatment of Māori staff. Ms Allan spoke out in a personal capacity during a farewell do on Friday for her fiancé Mani Dunlop, who presented RNZ's midday report. She said the organisation needed to reflect on why RNZ was failing to retain Māori talent. National leader Christopher Luxon says Maunga Kia candidate Greg Fleming's 2004 comments on civil unions were not raised with him, despite party officials being aware. Mr Fleming had asked why the government recognised same-sex couples, but didn't recognise incestual or polygamous relationships. Today he distanced himself from those remarks. The Insurance Council says it has settled just over 14,124 claims for the Auckland floods and Cyclone Gabrielle, about 15% of the total. The number of flood-related insurance claims for both events remains at 96,000, worth more than $2.4 billion. Finland is formally joining the NATO military alliance tonight. It took the decision to apply for membership and ditch its neutrality in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And at least one person is dead and about 30 injured after a train crash in the Netherlands en route between The Hague and Amsterdam. The passenger train was reportedly carrying at least 50 people when it derailed after hitting construction equipment. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Auckland, that crash at Newton Gully on State Highway 1's southbound link with State Highway 16 is still causing problems for merging traffic coming from the west heading south. Please be patient as cars and queues clear. And north of Wellington, State Highway 1 Transmission Gully has now fully reopened between Pauatahanui and Paikākāriki. Our next full bulletin is at the top of the hour at 6 o'clock.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Roads in the eastern Tararua district remain battered by Cyclone Gabrielle. Now this sparsely populated part of the lower North Island must find a way of meeting clean-up costs that could hit $100 million. Our reporter Jimmy Allingham drove around the district with the district's Mayor Tracy Collis.
As I join Mrs Collis in a sturdy ute, it soon becomes clear why a four-wheel drive is vital to get around the district's cyclone-scarred roads.
We're just going to exit Dannyburg and head out to Akatio, into some of the areas that have been severely impacted on the roading network. You'll see parts where we call them dropouts, that's a technical term, but parts of the dropout is where part of the road is missing. So at Akatio, some of that is nearly half a road.
Half a road is at least passable. Many roads still aren't, forcing residents to take lengthy trips to get to work and school, while a couple of properties remain totally cut off.
We've got 13 roads that are closed. We've got other roads that are 4x4 access only. Some of the roads that you're going to see as we head out, yes, they're open, and we've opened them because it's essential for our people to be able to get through, to conduct business, to get to school. But as we travel out, you'll see that they've got slip material on one side of the road, and we've still got very soft material, and that is sometimes moving.
The treacherous conditions pose concerns for the winter ahead and plenty of worries for the present.
There are no logging trucks currently using the road, so the impact to the industry is enormous. Farmers, we can't get a truck and trailer out on these roads, it just can't take that sort of weight, so there's an increased cost.
Mrs Collis says the district itself is facing a huge clean-up bill that could hit $75 to $100 million on roads, an impossibility for its population of just over 19,000. It has New Zealand's fourth largest local roading network of just under 2,000 kilometres, and plenty of it needs work, as we see on Route 52 east of Dannyburg between Weiba and Pongaroa.
There's a lot of cones, but actually when you're driving and just going that bit slower, you can see we're just passing now a hillside that hasn't finished coming down. On the other side there's a large piece of road that's gone, and you've got the river right beside it.
Tararua was saturated before the cyclone hit. Seemingly every hillside has slip scars and farms are struggling to bounce back.
Talking to one farmer last week, they still haven't gained full access to their property. There's a lot of diggers working very, very hard just so that farmers can access their own property for that damage. There is still, we're 6 weeks in, there are still fences being cleaned.
One road into coastal settlement Akitio is shut and massively damaged, while another, River Road, is indefinitely closed between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. as a temporary access track around a washout passes through private property. It's a steep, one-lane gravel track controlled by traffic lights.
That's pretty tough in a community too, when you know you've got to be home by 7 o'clock, your lifestyle going out, ensuring that you're back through that gate on time is pretty tough. And I've heard them talk about their curfew.
Yeah, so we're on the track above where the road slipped down, and looking below, there's no road.
No, there's no road. They'll have to do some assessment on that. There are parts of Akatio out on Coast Road where there is movement. They'll need to assess all of that.
At the beach, well, there are only logs in sight, stretching along the coast.
It looks a mess. We've seen where it's obviously been high tide and it's sent some of the log, wood and debris across the road, still causing damage, but it's being tossed around out there. So still an awful lot of wood out here. It isn't a place at the moment that you just come out to the beach.
On one closed road, Mrs. Collis is seeing the damage for the first time. It's a sobering sight.
We've been through a cyclone, but some of it just looks like a war zone. It's hard to take when you know how beautiful this country was, and you remember what it was like to drive through on a nice day, and my heart just goes out to the people that live here.
Waka Kotahi has so far contributed $10 million for initial clean-up work.
A third baby, less than a year old, has died of whooping cough this year, prompting a renewed push for people to get their pepe vaccinated. The highly infectious disease can be spread through coughing and sneezing, and people can be contagious before their symptoms start to show. The latest death is unrelated to the two earlier cases. Whooping cough can be highly unpredictable in young babies and can get worse very quickly. Te Whatu Ora's Dr. William Ranger joins us now. Kia ora, this is incredibly sad, isn't it?
It is very sad. It's very tragic for the families involved, and it does remind us that whooping cough can be a very, very serious illness indeed, particularly for little babies.
And so in terms of immunisation, how are you encouraging people to get their pepe immunised?
It's important that little babies have their vaccinations according to the schedule. So that's at 6 weeks, at 3 months and at 5 months. But when they're first born, the little babies are very vulnerable. And so we strongly recommend that pregnant women, every time that they're pregnant, they can have a free booster vaccination at 16 weeks or onwards during their pregnancy. That way the little baby is protected when it's born. There are also boosters available for older people at the ages of 45 and 65. But we certainly also encourage that people who may be off and around little babies do consider having a booster, although in some instances there may be a fee for that, but they should discuss that with their healthcare provider.
What's the uptake like for vaccination?
The uptake of pertussis vaccination decreased during the COVID period. So at the moment, at 12 months, so for children at the age of 12 months, the rate is across New Zealand 63%, but for Pacific children it is 59%, and for Maori children it is 62%. So that across the board is far too low. We really are aiming for 95%. So
is that dangerously low, Doctor?
It means that if we have an outbreak of pertussis, that there are children there who are very vulnerable. So yes, it's a good reminder to get vaccinated.
Do we have an outbreak? Because you've got 3 deaths of 3 small babies and only 11 cases reported, right, of whooping cough. So what does that tell you?
That's right. That tells us that we don't have an outbreak at the moment. There's quite a good level of testing for pertussis going on in the community at the moment. And all of those tests are coming back negative, except for those 11 that we've had so far this year. We also know that there isn't high rates of pertussis overseas at the moment. I guess our fear is that despite those reasonable testing rates in the community, there may be pockets where there may be pertussis circulating. So The answer is no, there's
You
not
mean
an outbreak at the
undetected
moment.
cases? Sorry to interrupt, Doctor, but just to be clear, do you mean undetected cases where people haven't reported their symptoms, there's no record of it, so you don't know?
Yes, that's right. And so people should be aware, I mean, in little children, as I said, it's a pretty severe illness, and babies get very sick very, very quickly, and they need to be taken to medical attention urgently. For adults, it can just be a lingering cough. It's often called the 100-day cough, and it goes on and on for weeks and weeks. Our fear is that people might just think, well, maybe that's something to do with COVID, or it's just a bit of a cold that's lingering. So we suggest that if you have a cough that keeps on going for longer than 2 weeks, it's a good idea to get that checked out, because it might be whooping cough.
Appreciate your time this evening. That's Dr. William Ranger from Te Whatu Ora there. 8 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's a photo opportunity of a different kind. The chance to identify a smiling woman in a decades-old black and white photo found tucked behind the wallpaper in a hall cupboard in a Dunedin house. The Kenmure home, built in 1958, has had only 3 owners. And the newest one, Caitlin Thompson, was just looking for a place to put the vacuum cleaner when she discovered the photo, complete with a handwritten note. Now Caitlin is keen to identify the woman in the photo and return it to her family, and she joins us now. Hi Caitlin, tell us about the photo. What's in it? What's the note?
Kia ora, Lisa. So the photo that we found is a black and white photo of a young woman. It, I would say, comes from sort of the late 1940s, 1950s era. And the note says, "To Rennie, with love, Renee." It's signed by Franz Barter, who's a portrait photographer that was operating in Dunedin between 1944 and 1975. So we can tell that it's an original.
So, Caitlin, just explain, where did you find it? Like, do you think it was hidden? What do you reckon?
I mean, it possibly could have fallen behind the wallpaper, but it did feel as though it had possibly been stashed there. Like you say, I was literally looking for a place to put the vacuum cleaner. We are planning on renovating the house, and there was some wallpaper peeling off in the hall. So we pulled it down, and out came this photograph. So possibly stashed there intentionally.
And what do you think the story is behind it?
In my mind, I would like to think that it's a love story, of course. I wonder whether she's given this photo of herself to someone that she was involved with or somebody that she loved. It could be anything, though. Who knows? And
what kind of condition is it in? Do you have it there with you, Caitlin,
Yes.
at the moment?
I do.
Yes. Hold it up. Okay.
It is in very good condition.
And that's a cardboard frame around it, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
So it's
old school.
booklet.
And as you say, her clothing, it's almost like a sort of little houndstooth blazer and a very nice blouse. And she looks incredibly happy, doesn't she? You could be
She
right.
does.
Love
It really
story. I like that idea.
compelled me, the picture, you know, she looks joyful. And there's something about that picture and the thought that maybe this woman lived in the house that we now live in. I don't know, just conjures up sort of feelings of like happiness and kind of wanting to know what her story might be.
So that's led you on this journey to find that story. So what do you need people's help with? And how can they get in touch if they think they might know who that woman is?
So, yeah, if you recognise the woman or you think that you might know Rennie or Renee that lived in Dunedin, I guess in sort of the 50s, we'd love to hear from you.
Are you on social media? Have you posted it on Facebook or one of those formats where people can go and have a look?
No, we haven't actually. Really, it's sort of spun out of control a wee bit. It was only in the ODT this morning. So possibly the easiest way would be to contact the Otago Daily Times.
And we'll put the photo up on our webpage or a link to this so that people can see. Hey, just before you go, was it that delicious wallpaper that's on the wall in the room behind you? Was it hiding behind some of that, was it?
No, it was a deep red with big brown flowers on it.
Caitlin, they both seem like keepers. Let's hope we can solve this mystery for you. Thank you so much for joining us. So that photo, we'll put a link to it on our webpage. Caitlin Thompson there wants to find out who the woman is and what the curious story might be behind it. Donald Trump has arrived in New York ahead of tomorrow's D-Day court appearance in Manhattan. The former president was indicted last month over hush money given to a porn star just before the 2016 election. His lawyers say he'll plead not guilty. The ABC's Jade McMillan has this report.
We're watching really history right now unfold on your...
Emerging from his Mar-a-Lago property in Florida, Donald Trump travelled in a motorcade to where his private jet was parked in Palm Beach. Through his car window, he waved to supporters who'd gathered at the airport to watch him fly out. Kevin Potter was one of them.
I'm here to help President Trump. I grew up a free man in a free country. It's just not a free country anymore.
The former president will spend the night at Trump Tower. There's a heavy police presence here, with media crews from around the world watching on, and a group of supporters and critics crammed into a fenced-off area on the footpath outside.
We love Trump! We love Trump! We love Trump! He himself cannot save this country. It is our turn, everybody's turn, to take action.
This man should never have been our president. If we don't stop him, he will bring more damage to the country to the point where we may lose the democracy.
Donald Trump is expected to be accompanied by Secret Service agents as he surrenders to authorities in Lower Manhattan tomorrow. The details of the arraignment are still being finalised, but it's anticipated he'll have his photo and fingerprints taken before appearing before a judge and pleading not guilty. New York Police Commissioner Keishant Sewell says security is being stepped up across the city.
There are no credible or specific threats to New York City at this time. New Yorkers may see an increased police presence in parts of the city and should anticipate intermittent road closures over the next 2 days, particularly in Manhattan. To avoid delays, I too urge everyone to use mass transit when possible.
New York's Mayor Eric Adams has criticised Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's planning a protest across the road from where Mr. Trump is expected to appear.
While there may be some rebel-rousers thinking about coming to our city tomorrow, our message is clear and simple. Control yourselves. New York City is our home, not a playground for your misplaced anger. We are the safest large city in America because we respect the rule of law. If one is caught participating in any act of violence, they will be arrested and held accountable, no matter who you are.
A city preparing for anything ahead of an unprecedented moment.
Some of your feedback now, a lot of you getting in touch about scooters, e-scooters. This person says, I think e-scooters are fine so long as there are plenty of designated racks. It's the fact that they can effectively be abandoned anywhere on the street, which contributes to the clutter and overall negativity towards them. Kent, however, says ban all scooters from the CBD. The risk to pedestrians and the disabled is just not worth it for the sake of having scooters available for idiots to ride. Nick says, hi Lisa, I work beside a footpath every day at the Mount. By far the biggest hazard is grown men going fast on bikes. If we had good cycleways, Rachel says, everywhere scooters could use them. Good point. And someone who's pro says scooters greatly enhance the experience of public transport.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening. Ngā mihi o te pō, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The Cabinet Minister, Kiri Allan, has apologised after criticising RNZ's treatment of Māori staff during a farewell for her fiancé, Mani Dunlop. Ms Dunlop, who presented RNZ's midday report, departed the organisation last week. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Ms Allan took aim at RNZ's culture during Ms Dunlop's work farewell on Friday, addressing gathered staff including CEO Paul Thompson and board member Jane Wrightson. In a speech, Ms Allan said the organisation's board and leadership team needed to reflect on why RNZ was failing to retain Māori talent. She prefaced her comments by saying they were off the record and made in her personal capacity rather than as a minister. In a statement to RNZ today, Ms Allan admits her comments comments could have been interpreted as her telling RNZ how to manage its staff or company. She says that was not her intent, but is sincerely sorry if her comments made people feel uncomfortable.
Former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has been appointed as Special Envoy for the Christchurch Call. Ms Ardern established the initiative to eliminate violent extremist content online in the wake of the March 15 mosque attacks. Here's our political reporter, Katie Scotcher.
Her successor, Prime Minister Chris Hipkins, has appointed Ms Ardern to the newly created position. Mr Hipkins says Ms Ardern will be New Zealand's senior representative on Christchurch Call-related matters. Ms Ardern will report directly to Mr Hipkins and has declined to be paid for the job. The role will be reviewed at the end of the year. Ms Ardern is due to deliver her final speech at Parliament tomorrow and will formally leave politics next week.
A limited statutory manager has been appointed to oversee the running of Wesley College near Pukekohe in Auckland. The Methodist State Integrated Secondary School has been the subject of recent media reports of violence and bullying. The school's board will remain in place, but the manager, Shane Edwards, will oversee most of its powers regarding curriculum, policies, procedures, and will advise the board on health and safety and the well-being of its staff and students. In a message to the school community, the principal, Brian Evans, says the school welcomes the support as it will assist it in progress towards being an exemplary model of change. The former US President Donald Trump has spent the evening before his New York court appearance tomorrow morning consulting lawyers at his residence at Trump Tower. He's facing criminal charges linked to a payment made to buy the silence of a porn star just before the 2016 election. The BBC's Neda Tawfiq reports.
City and federal officials had ramped up security ahead of his arrival. Outside on Fifth Avenue, a small number of Trump supporters turned up, but so too did those who dislike him. Later, Mr. Trump will turn himself in and then appear in court. Afterward, the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg will address the public for the first time on this case. Donald Trump plans to leave New York immediately and instead deliver a public address from Mar-a-Lago, surrounded by his supporters.
Gore's residents are divided over who's to blame for the current impasse at Gore District Council. Last week it was revealed first-term Gore Mayor Ben Bell and the council's chief executive Stephen Parry are no longer speaking. Another councillor has been appointed as a go-between for the two men, and yesterday councillor Brett Highstead resigned after 5 terms in the role. Gore residents who spoke to RNZ were divided equally among those who believe the young mayor is in over his head and those who believe he's dealing with a council and staff who are refusing to work with him. Those at the council are continuing to keep quiet about the issue. The Insurance Council says insurers have so far paid out 15% of claims for the Auckland floods and Cyclone Gabrielle. It says 14,000 of 96,000 claims have been settled. The total claims are worth more than $2.4 billion. Chief Executive Tim Grafton says some people could be waiting until well into next year for their claims to be settled.
People only have to reflect on the images that they've seen of the massive amount of silt and destruction in the Hawke's Bay as an example of some of the real challenges that lie ahead there, and the remoteness of some of the properties in terms of getting access, assessing loss, and then fixing things up.
Tim Grafton says motor and contents claims are usually straightforward, whereas relining houses can take months, full rebuilds more than a year, and land issues longer still. An Auckland wheelchair user wants to see e-scooters off footpaths to improve accessibility on the street. In Auckland, Beam and Lime have a licence to operate 2,400 e-bikes and scooters, and e-scooters can be used on the footpath or the road. 70-year-old Laurie McNess says she was hit by an e-scooter in Aotea Square 2 years ago.
I was coming down here, they were going really fast and they came right bang and they got tangled up in the middle of my chair. I remember the person going, sorry, as they disentangled the scooter, jumped on and sped off.
Laurie McNess says discarded e-scooters often block her access on the footpath, so she uses the road to get past. 4 people have minor injuries after a crash between a bus and a vehicle on the outskirts of Christchurch. The crash happened at around 4:30 this afternoon, just outside Rolleston, at the intersection of Selwyn, Ellesmere Swamp and Edwards Roads. Police say 1 person in the vehicle and 3 people on the bus have minor injuries. And State Highway 1 Transmission Gully has reopened after a crash between Paikakariki and Pauatahanui early this evening. Lanes in both directions were shut after a collision between a fuel tanker and another truck saw nearly 1,000 litres of fuel spill onto the motorway out of Wellington. Delays are expected. That's the news.
Kia ora, I'm Hingarangi Ford's host of Mata. Tonight I'll be speaking with the new National MP, Tama Pōtaka. Then we'll discuss the latest in Māori politics with Victoria University's Dr. Lara Greaves and commentator Ngāri Mublia. Nō reira, ariari taringa mai kia Mata after the 6:30 headlines this evening on RNZ National or at rnz.co.nz/Mata.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. You are listening to RNZ National and you're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Te Ika Māui, the North Island, mainly fine but isolated showers about Northland until tonight. Tomorrow, cloudy periods and isolated showers developing in western areas south of Waipomo. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine apart from areas of morning low cloud or fog. Bulla and Westland, fine at first. Cloudy periods developing this afternoon or evening with isolated showers. Rain spreading north through Westland tomorrow with heavy falls and thunderstorms possible. Otago and Southland fine inland but cloudy periods and a shower or two about coastal areas today. Cloud increasing tomorrow with a few spots of morning rain, then showers spreading north in the evening. Fiordland, a few showers turning to rain for a time tonight and tomorrow morning with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms. Chatham Islands often cloudy with showers, clearing tomorrow afternoon. At 6:07. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Nā mihi Evie, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Te Pūkenga has officially decided to close Auckland's mains campus, leaving music and audio students in limbo and tutors out of jobs. The organisation in charge of bringing together New Zealand's 16 polytechs says mains enrolments have been falling in recent years and the campus has been operating at a significant loss. It may be just the start of job cuts across Te Pūkenga, with Chief Executive Peter Winder saying more than 200 jobs will be axed. Tom Taylor joins me in the studio with the latest. Tom, what's happened today?
Kia ora, Lisa. So the Music and Audio Institute of New Zealand, or MAINS as it's known, it has 2 campuses, one in Auckland and one in Christchurch. So the one we're concerned with today is the Auckland campus. Now that's been closed as of today. We've had confirmation of that. That's despite dozens of submissions requesting that it stay open, coming from leaders of the music industry, people like the Grammy Award-winning producer Joel Little, who works with Lorde, Taylor Swift. The list goes on. So Te Pūkenga's CEO, Peter Winder, has passed down this decision via SIT, the Southern Institute of Technology, which was actually in charge of MAINS through an interesting kind of relationship there. Yeah. So today I spoke after the meeting to one of the tutors, Chris Orange, caught up on Auckland's Victoria Street, which is where the old MAINS campus was before it moved 3 years ago to Mangere. Then in the January floods, that Mangere premises was flooded out. So since the start of the year, students have actually not been able to start their studies at MAINS. But now about 18 staff members and about 39 students find themselves in a kind of limbo state. So here's what Chris had to say about all that. So Chris, you've just come from the meeting where the future of MAINS was decided. What happened in the meeting?
I don't think the future of MAINS has been decided. In terms of SIT, Te Pūkenga and Peter Winder's final decision, yeah, that's happened today, the final decision. We were given our notice, but there are a lot of questions remaining. How are we going to teach out the students who are partway through their quals? Yet to be figured out. And of course, provision for all the students coming through schools, want to study music, DJ, making beats, setting up live sound stages. Where are they going to go in 2024? So SIT, Te Pūkenga, not interested in answers for that. They're just talking money and basically piking out. And I think Peter Winder is piking out in this regard. He's abnegating responsibility for funding of the arts or for any kind of provision for training in the arts.
This all seemed to happen so quickly, though. Like at the start of the year, you thought you were gearing up for another full year of tutoring. What happened?
What happened? We were ready to start, and our premises in Mangere flooded on February the 1st or January 30th that weekend, and trashed all our equipment, our beautiful library. We had instruments floating around. So we yes, true, we didn't have any premises, but we were told to go and source alternative premises, which we did for 3 weeks. We'd found somewhere, and we were waiting for them to sign the contracts, and they reneged on that and called a potential surplus of staffing review.
And when you look at some of the successful people in the music industry that have come through Mains, what do you think this means for the future of the music industry in Auckland and Aotearoa?
The industry is calling for sound technicians, for people who can work in audiovisual and film. They're not going to have the trained people. You can train on the job only so much, and then, it stops and no one knows anything how to run a machine. Yes, it's technologically demanding. You need the latest technology and upskilling. Mains does that. Today, the decision is just, it's unconscionable, really.
What's this going to mean for students? Like, is there any plan from management in place to get these students through their degrees?
Our students, they're talking about what to do now, but the horse has bolted. I don't quite see the logic, really, to lay off all the staff and then to call the students and say, well, if you'd like to finish your degree, how would you like to do it? Because there's nowhere else they can do it. There are private providers, multinational audio college here. There's a worship-based music school, and then there's the Auckland University. If you don't have NCA qualifications, you can't go to university. And Mains has been, taxpayer funded, Polytech provider, and the lowest fees and the most experienced staff.
And one of those being yourself. How long have you been a tutor at Mains?
Since 2013, so for about 10 years, yeah. But we've got staff who've been here for over 20 years. For us, it's not, it wasn't so much about our jobs today. We've had a lot of support from all the community, from our students, from the industry, and Peter Winder's had 70 or 80 odd letters saying it's time to step up, Pete, and show some leadership with the arts. For us, we lose our jobs, but we've been teaching music for a long time. We're hopeful that there will be a provision in Tamaki Makaurau for sound and audio in the future, and our students are certainly waiting to find out.
So, Tom, you've got a statement from Te Pukenga. What does that say?
Yeah, so I just received this about 10 minutes ago. They wanted to make sure that they'd been to all of the staff affected before they came back to me. So it says that they've considered all the feedback, all these submissions carefully, but they have decided to permanently close Mains in Auckland. This is coming off the back of what they say is several years of significant financial loss for the campus. They say it's not a decision they're taking lightly, and they will be working to provide any assistance to staff and students to potentially redirect their studies to another provider. One of those providers in Auckland is SAE. So I actually talked with their director today, who says that some students from Mains have already transferred over to the SAE program. That does come with significantly higher fees, really. The Mains diploma of audio engineering, about $7,000, versus the SAE program, about $12,000. But Mains or Te Pukenga will be covering the difference there for any students who are able to transfer over there. So Mains or Te Pukenga are saying that this is kind of underlying the need for them to really work with their workforce development councils, which are tasked to design programs that meet industry standards and are financially sustainable at the same time. They did point out carefully that the Mains campus in Christchurch is still open for business and remains an option for anyone wanting to get into recording or the performance industries.
Thank you, Tom. That's our reporter Tom Taylor there, bringing us up to date with the Auckland Mains campus. That's music and audio students. While they're in limbo, that's officially closing the decision out today. As the world waits for former US President Trump's arraignment in a Manhattan court, it's still unclear if he'll have a mugshot taken. Mr. Trump's attorney told CNN she didn't see a purpose of releasing a mugshot, saying he's the most recognised face in the world. But if there is one released, Mr. Trump would join a long list of other prominent names with booking photos. CNN's Sunlan Sefati has more.
In 1 second, one flash, one photo, an indelible image is produced, steeped in the long history of the justice system. Eyes forward, looking right into the camera, that exposure exposing the person, becoming a lasting part of their own legacy. Al Capone, Pablo Escobar, John Gotti. These mugshots of famous suspects have become iconic. Lee Harvey Oswald's taken just hours after he assassinated President John F. Kennedy. O.J. Simpson's mugshot as enduring as images of his white Ford Bronco racing down a California highway. Now all eyes are on the former president's movements, and the palace intrigue is building. If Trump, known for his media and image savvy, will become the first former president to have a mugshot taken or not.
The leaning has been not to because, A, it's not really necessary. Everybody knows what he looks like. It's not like if he fled the jurisdiction that they would say, wow, we really should have had that mugshot. B, if they need to, they can create a mugshot from existing pictures. But the real concern is that the mugshot is going to be misused.
New York state law prohibits the release of booking photos unless police say there is a legitimate law enforcement purpose to release them. Sources tell CNN authorities are concerned about the potential photo leaking. The Trump team is trying to avoid it.
I do have a problem with leaking of pictures. I think that because we're in a campaign, because he's the leading GOP candidate, it's not going to help anything. Mugshots are for people so that you recognize who they are. He is the most recognized face in the world, let alone the country right now. So there's no need for that. There's no need for the theatrics, no.
Other politicians like John Edwards, Tom DeLay, and Rick Perry attempted to turn their mugshot into more of a pleasing headshot, smiling with perfectly coiffed hair, suit, and tie. Then there are the mugshots that go on to become celebrated. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, John Lewis, Jane Fonda, a badge of defiance. The world waits now for Tuesday's historical moment, a moment that would only be punctuated by this unparalleled mugshot.
Russian authorities say Ukrainian spies and Russian opposition activists were to blame for the bombing that killed a prominent pro-war blogger in a St. Petersburg cafe yesterday. They've released new video showing the moment of the explosion and detained a Russian woman as a suspect. 24 others were hospitalised after the blast. 6 are in critical condition. The BBC's Frank Gardner reports.
An ordinary scene on an ordinary street in St. Petersburg. A woman enters a cafe carrying a box containing a statuette. It's hard to verify this, but Russia says she was delivering a bomb. Inside the cafe, there's a meeting of Russian pro-war activists. The invited speaker is this man, Vladlen Tatarsky, a prolific blogger with over 500,000 followers. And then this. The explosion killed him outright and injured over 30 others. Russian officials were quick to blame Ukraine, which denied it. But the suspect now detained is not Ukrainian, she's Russian. Police are naming her as Daria Trepova, an anti-war activist. They've released footage of her being arrested at home. She's then seen being questioned, apparently under duress. Russia says she's confessed to carrying the statuette that killed Tatarsky in the cafe. He was a big figure amongst Russian military bloggers. A former convict, he fought against Ukraine in the Donbass. He was highly critical of Russian failures on the battlefield, leading some to suspect inter-Russian rivalry. Well, this is a really murky incident. Despite all the claims and counterclaims, it's not immediately clear exactly who was behind this explosion. But to help guide us through it is Olga Ivshina from the BBC Russian service. Olga, what is your take on this explosion?
Russian war supporters and many other experts believe it must be Ukrainian intelligence behind this attack. Russian investigative committee thinks that Russian opposition was also involved. We need to remember that in last year, another prominent vocal supporter of war was targeted in Moscow. On the other hand, many Russian war commanders were killed in strange circumstances since 2014.
As Russian investigators piece together what happened yesterday in St. Petersburg, the propaganda war continues. Russia says this was Ukraine-linked terrorism. Ukraine's presidential advisor says it was Russian on Russian. Spiders, he tweeted, are eating each other in a jar.
It's 6:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's get to some of your feedback now. Lots of it on the issues of scooters, and this is about whether they're a hazard for people living with disabilities, particularly vision impairment. This listener says, I was carrying a heavy box up Bowen Street in Wellington. 2 scooters came down a hill at high speed. The second hit me. I lost a large lump of skin off my arm and required 4 courses of antibiotics to heal it. This person says the scooter management very reluctantly paid part of their medical costs. This one in too, I work in Wellington ED and see far too many serious injuries, including vegetative states. They are a death trap. And another person says the council are idiots. Half the footpaths aren't even 1.8 metres wide. And I've had to move scooters for the vision impacted and mobility scooter users. Reported to council, but they want me to complete an official complaint form. Really? Says Nikki. And someone from Gisborne's got in touch. Ingrid. Hi, Ingrid. Our footpaths are so crowded there is no room for people on their feet, she reckons. Today, Finland joined the NATO alliance. The country, which has a border of nearly 1,300 kilometres with Russia, began the application process following Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Its membership was ratified last week. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg says NATO and Finland will be stronger as a result. Here's the BBC's Paul Adams.
This has been a rapid process. Finland only said it wanted to join NATO last year. In Brussels, its flag will be raised at NATO headquarters. For the organisation's Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg, it's a moment to savour.
This is a historic week. We will welcome Finland as the 31st member of NATO, making Finland safer and our alliance stronger.
Before Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year, Vladimir Putin said he wanted NATO to pull back from Eastern Europe and halt the process of expansion. Now Mr. Stoltenberg says the exact opposite is happening. With Finland's accession, Russia's border with NATO will more than double. The Baltic Sea, home to 2 major Russian ports, will become even more part of NATO's backyard, a process that'll be complete when Sweden joins, probably in the coming months. That's being held up by another alliance member, Turkey, which says Sweden still hasn't done enough to crack down on Kurdish militants living there. Until recently, Finland faced similar Turkish objections. Mr. Stoltenberg said he was confident all differences would be resolved in time for this summer's NATO summit in Lithuania. Moscow says it plans to strengthen its forces in northwestern Russia to confront what it sees as a threatening move by NATO. If the alliance went further and deployed troops and equipment in Finland, then Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko said the Kremlin was willing to take what he called additional steps.
The drug dealer who murdered a 9-year-old girl in the British city of Liverpool has been jailed for life and ordered to serve a minimum of 42 years in prison. The 34-year-old refused to go into the dock for the sentencing and none of his family were present in court. He fatally shot Olivia Pratt-Corbell and injured her mother as he chased a fellow drug dealer into their Liverpool home last August. The BBC's Judith Moritz has this report.
The teddy bear that Cheryl Corbell has been clasping at court is made from her daughter's pyjamas. Some small comfort as she arrived to see Olivia's murderer sentenced. But in a cruel insult, she was denied the opportunity to look into the eyes of Thomas Cashman. He had been brought to court amidst high security this morning, having last week been convicted of the little girl's murder. I was in court as Olivia's family waited for Cashman to be brought up from the cells. We waited and then waited some more. The police waited, the prosecution waited, the jurors waited. And then Cashman's barrister came in and said he wouldn't be coming. The glass dock stayed empty and the hearing happened without him. It meant he wasn't there to hear Cheryl Corbell as she went into the witness box to speak about her daughter's murder. She cried and she said the thing she misses most is hearing Olivia say mum. Everything's just so quiet now, she said. I can't cope with the silence. Cheryl Corbell was supported in court by her family as sentence was passed.
We can now draw a line under 7 months of agonising torment that we have had to endure at the hands of Cashman.
Olivia was shot last August. Terrified, she'd got out of bed to find her mum after hearing gunfire in the street. Cashman was chasing another drugs dealer, Joseph Nee. He fired at him, but his gun jammed and Nee ran towards an open doorway. It was Olivia's house. Cashman shot as Nee barged in. The bullet went through the door.
I'm on it as well.
Olivia's family say she died a scared 9-year-old, and they hope that haunts Cashman for the rest of his life.
All I want to know is what I'm arrested for.
He was caught after a large-scale manhunt.
You're under arrest on suspicion of murder.
The 2 guns he used haven't been found. Tonight, Cashman is beginning a 42-year stretch behind bars. Father of 2 himself, he's shown no remorse and taken no responsibility for murdering another parent's child.
NASA has revealed the identities of the 4 astronauts, 3 Americans and 1 Canadian, who will fly on a mission around the moon. The launch of Artemis 2, due late next year, is part of preparations for humankind to walk again on the lunar surface for the first time in more than half a century. The BBC's Jonathan Amos watched the proceedings.
Ladies and gentlemen, your Artemis 2 crew.
To great fanfare, the boss of NASA, Bill Nelson, introduced each of the astronauts in turn. This is a new generation trying to recapture the excitement and daring do of a past era. Not since the Apollo missions, which ended in 1972, have humans been anywhere near the moon, let alone set foot on it. Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch and Jeremy Hansen are part of NASA's new exploration project it calls Artemis. The upcoming flight may only be a loop around the moon, but for Victor Glover, the first ever African-American to be picked for a lunar mission, it signals an even grander ambition.
We need to celebrate this moment in human history, because Artemis 2 is more than a mission to the moon and back. It's more than a mission that has to happen before we send people to the surface of the moon. It is the next step on the journey that gets humanity to Mars.
The Artemis program was initiated last year with an unpiloted test of a huge new rocket and a capsule. If all goes well with this next Artemis outing, a follow-up crew will be chosen to attempt a landing, potentially in 2025, although NASA has yet to develop all of the equipment it needs to make a touchdown possible.
Right, a plug for the Coromandel. We interviewed Len Salt, the mayor, earlier in the program. They're really keen for visitors to come this Easter and say they really want and need them. Peter has got in touch to say, I've just driven from Auckland to Whitianga. The road is good. Very few delays, says Peter, and the weather is gorgeous. So there you go, first hand from Peter. On the subject of marketing junk food to kids through sport, Andrew says, isn't it fantastic so many children are involved in sport? If the government's going to ban junk food financing, they need to step up and replace it. The government cannot be, the children rather, cannot be abandoned because of a lack of finance. And another person says it's parents that need to take responsibility for what their kids eat and when, and surely a treat after the game isn't out of the question. And the sponsors are needed. Parents need to be parents and parent up and set rules, says Sandy. That is about all we have got time for this evening. Thank you so much for all your feedback. The Late News team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. If you missed anything, check out Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a popo, and tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up, we'll be live in the United States as the country braces itself for Donald Trump's court appearance. You will not want to miss that. 5 a.m. tomorrow morning.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening. Ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has been appointed Special Envoy for the Christchurch Call, which she set up to remove violent extremist content from the internet. Ms Ardern is due to deliver her final speech at Parliament tomorrow. Cabinet Minister Kiri Allan has told RNZ it needs to reflect on why it was failing to retain Māori talent. She made the comments at a farewell for her fiancé, Mani Dunlop, who presented Midday Report, but says she wasn't speaking as a minister. And Te Pūkenga, the New Zealand Institute of Skills and Technology, is closing Auckland's mains campus, leaving 39 music and audio students in limbo and 18 tutors out of jobs. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tomorrow on Afternoons with Jesse Mulligan, the data tells the story we already knew was true. Teenagers are facing a mental health crisis with soaring rates of anxiety and depression. Right around 2012, in English-speaking countries, including New Zealand, teen mental health collapsed. And why? Well, prominent teen mental health experts brought in research assistant Zach Roche to review the data and look for an answer, and he may have found it. He joins me on Afternoons from 1 p.m. tomorrow on RNZ National.